There's a statement we often hear when we discuss race in society with a particular kind of person. This is a person who, if asked, will tell you they firmly believe that discrimination on the basis of race or anything else is wrong. If you ask them if you think they should judge who to befriend or employ or trust based on the colour of someone's skin, they will say, of course not, of course you shouldn't. They absolutely believe it too, at least the speaking part of them does. And the statement they often make is, oh, I just don't see colour, I just don't see race. Now, is that true? Can that be true? Of course, when someone says I don't see race or I don't see colour, they don't mean they literally can't tell whether someone is a person of colour. They just mean that that visual information doesn't affect the opinion they form of someone as a person. So the statement I don't see race isn't really a statement about seeing, it's an epistemic statement. It's a statement about how we form beliefs. So can you not see race? It was once the opinion of doctors and philosophers alike that our behaviour was under our conscious control at all times. And that theory fell by the wayside in the 20th century when more research gave rise to this notion of implicit action or implicit bias. Many of the functions of the mind are not conscious. We can read without having to actively decode each letter. We can walk while paying no attention to our feet. These are not things we're explicitly conscious of doing. They're implicit actions. So what, right? When I'm considering whether to hire someone or trust someone, these aren't automatic responses. These aren't impulse considerations I'm making. This is taking into account all the relevant and important things about them and deliberately excluding all the factors that don't matter, like race. So yeah, there are things that our brains do without consciously thinking about it, but that doesn't prove that we make negative judgments about people of colour because of their colour. Well, this is where the science becomes relevant. Take a look at this list, pause the video and read it out loud as quickly as you can. And now do the same with this list. You will have found list 2 a little bit harder to get through. Your brain can read and it can name colours. It can do both of those things very quickly. In list 1, the word you read and the colour you see are the same, so your brain can match those up and say the word very quickly. But when you're reading list 2, your brain has these two contradicting associations that you have to untangle in order to correctly read the list aloud. So your brain has to work harder to read list 2 out loud. It takes longer. This difference is caused by the implicit association in your brain between the words and the colours. If you take this principle, get some professional experimental psychologists to design a computer program around it, you get an implicit association test. And this is something you can use to prove whether someone has an implicit association between two different ideas. We can test whether someone associates one thing with another thing. If you want to know more about how this test works, you can look at the source in the description. But thousands and thousands of people have taken them, and they find that everyone makes some kind of association between different racial groups and positive and negative words. Further studies find that people who associate negative words with people of a particular racial group are likely to respond less generously to people of that group. They might smile less or talk less or make less eye contact. They're also more likely to interpret neutral actions as negative or hostile. That might not sound very significant, but what if you're in a job interview? What if you're in court trying to persuade a jury of your innocence? Studies have even shown that doctors will give different prescriptions to people based on the implicit racial biases they hold. These small behaviours add up to big differences. If you show a North American a picture of a person holding an object that they can't see clearly, they are substantially more likely to think that object is a gun if that person is black. When you look at the data, something even more disturbing comes up. Your explicit beliefs, the beliefs you say you have and will staunchly defend, have little or nothing to do with the implicit biases you exhibit. People who went into these studies and stated with absolute certainty that they never judged anyone negatively on the basis of race or colour or gender all exhibited these biases at just the same rate. It does not matter what you think you believe, your actions tell a different story. Researchers were sent resumes out to job applications with a mixture of typically white and typically black sounding names. The white names got 50% more responses, regardless of the resume's content. It wasn't how qualified or experienced the applicants were, it was whether they had typically white or black sounding names that really made the difference. And this was the case for companies with equal opportunity policies just as much as it was for those without. We don't just see colour, we read it and we read into it. So what can we do about this? There's a lot of research going in different directions on this topic, but the simplest thing seems to be exposure. As we gradually gain ground in the fight for media and political representation that actually reflects the demographic makeup of our natures and cultures, maybe someday we'll see an improvement. We will probably never stop seeing colour, but perhaps with prolonged conscious and collective effort, we can see it in a less harmful way.